Well, again, welcome tonight to Cindy Neary's birthday. And so what we're going to do now is sing happy birthday to Cindy, since she's here this evening. Who has the pitch pipe? Okay, somebody has to start off.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday, dear Cindy. Happy birthday to you.
And for those of you in the audience, you've probably recognized this is not Lakewood Idol night. Yeah. Okay, well, tonight we're going to take a little side trip on our normal study session agenda because Councilmember Neary is not able to attend next week's council meeting on the 5th of December. And our first item for discussion tonight is a proclamation extending appreciation to Walter Neary for his dedicated service to the Lakewood City Council and citizens of Lakewood from 2004 through 2011. If Mr. Neary would join me at the podium. Okay, I'd like to read this proclamation. Now, before I read this, well, no, I'll read the proclamation first. Whereas on November 4th, 2003, Walter Neary was elected to position 7 of the Lakewood City Council and took office on January 1st, 2004. And whereas Walter Neary's years of service have been marked by exemplary leadership in working to improve the quality of life for the citizenry of Lakewood, and whereas Walter Neary has represented the city on numerous boards and committees, including the Greater Tacoma Convention Center, Public Facilities Board, Landmarks and Heritage Advisory Board, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Arts Commission, Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee, Lakewood Historical Society, Lakewood Chamber of Commerce, numerous task forces and ad hoc committees. And whereas throughout Walter Neary's service, he has earned the respect of the council and other civic leaders for his commitment to work toward the best interests of Lakewood citizens. And whereas Walter Neary's performance of his duties as a council member has been defined by excellence and led to significant positive contributions to municipal government, now therefore the Lakewood City Council and the citizens of Lakewood do hereby extend our deepest appreciation to Walter Neary for 8 years of distinguished service to Lakewood and the greater community, proclaimed this 28th day of November 2001, Doug Richardson, Mayor. And now we applaud. Well, actually, we might as well come on up here.
We'll do a photo.
Yeah, we're going to do tons of photos, I promise. And because it's your birthday, we also have a cake when we're done. So I'd next like to present
Wow, that's nice.
a miniature of the city gear, as I call it, which makes Alice cringe every time I call it the city gear. But a little miniature of the Lakewood seal.
Cool.
Is presented to Walter Neary, council member 2004 to 2011.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Now, what we're going to do at this point is I'm going to hand Walter a copy of a DVD which you're all about ready to watch. And he can have this for his historical memory there.
Thank you very much.
And you better figure out what the next thing to come after DVDs are, because eventually we won't be able to use DVD players
true,
anymore,
yeah.
and you won't be able to watch it.
Brain chips.
So what I'd like to do is take photographs before we start that. Before we show the video, I just want to add a word, and if a council member wants to do so, they can as well. You know, we talked about this proclamation, and we noticed or recognized Walter for his 8 years of service on the city council, but he really and truly has been involved with Lakewood since prior to incorporation. He certainly was instrumental as the editor of the Lakewood Journal all those years, and really, from an editorial perspective, really built the case for incorporation of the city of Lakewood. And of course, he was involved in virtually all the early council races as well, because we were being interviewed by Mr. Neary for endorsements and all of those kinds of things. And then, of course, Walter, I believe, would tell you that he responded to a call that he felt very strongly about when there were some challenges perhaps in the community, and that he didn't necessarily believe that the regular citizen of Lakewood was being represented or being heard, and so Walter made the decision to run for office in 2003. Right, 2003. And of course has served on the council ever since. Very passionate. Obviously, he's an author who wrote about the history of Lakewood, and that book, if you haven't purchased it already, takes us all the way up through the establishment of our police force in 2004, and that's in the book. So he's all been about Lakewood since I've known him, and I've known him for a long time now, and he's certainly been an excellent addition to the city council, and I think has served the citizens of Lakewood very, very well, and I wish him all the best and thank him for having served with us. Okay, if we can dim the lights, we have a "This Is Your Life" thing for you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, volume gonna work and everything?
It was earlier. Thank you. Wow, that's a lot of work. I put together things like that. That's a lot of work. Thank you. I suppose I want to begin by saying, first of all, that I have never actually held a job longer than 7.5 years. So I've held a role 8 years here is actually an achievement, and I'm glad the citizens have continued to have me. So first of all, I want to, first of all, thank you for honoring Cindy on her birthday. As I've already posted in a few sites, the best present I could give Cindy was not running for re-election. We've had a lot more time together this year. But it does remind us that there are spouses and family members who put up with an awful lot. When I started the campaign, we had 2 kids at home, and that meant, Cindy, I wasn't there, and Cindy was, and I am grateful to you for all the support and all the love. That makes me tear up, but I just want to cry in appreciation and love. I'm so grateful for you, and I think we're also grateful for family members who back us up and don't always get the attention. I'm just grateful that there was an opportunity to acknowledge Cindy tonight. I wanted to take just a minute, having sat through 8 years of study sessions and comp plan amendments and all that sort of thing, to make a few comments, reflect on the past, and offer a thought or two about the future. Doug's right. I maintain that I answered a call. It was actually 9 years ago. I was about where Chris is back there, just talking to somebody, and the meeting had concluded, and Bill Harrison got to the microphone and said, "Walter Neary, please come to the front." And I thought he was going to chew me out for that 1995 editorial where I called him the general, which he does. So, so I went up there. I thought I was in trouble. And Bill suggested I run for city council. And I thought, as a reporter, what an amazing honor, what an amazing compliment. I didn't know that Bill had asked everyone else he knew to be on the city council. He had asked all of the men in Lakewood, all of the women, any teenager who looked 15 or older, the dogs, half the cats, hamsters. Bill, at that point, was walking through Mountain View looking at freshly turned dirt, just talking to anybody trying to get a candidate. But I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to serve. And while I don't know, he always appreciated suggesting that to me. I was so honored and so pleased. 9 years ago, it was so frustrating because so many of our wounds and so many of our issues were self-inflicted. You look back and it seems like a great opportunity squandered because sales tax revenues were increasing, real estate transfers were increasing. We were in a great position to do great things, but so much of Lakewood was caught up in a turmoil. And it was a strange period where an idea really rose or fell depending on who suggested it. If a person was part of your group and they suggested an idea, it was good. And if they weren't part of your group and they suggested an idea, it was bad. And that's a way to conduct yourself personally, but it's not necessarily a way to form a foundation for government and public policy, where you have to listen to ideas on their merits. So I was pleased to throw myself into the fray and try to emphasize communication, try to emphasize talking about ideas such as initiative and referendum, not based on the loudness or the personal demeanor of the people suggesting them, but the powerful importance of the idea itself. And 8 or 9 years later, the way I measure success is you. I mean, the people who've been running for office the last couple cycles are just great. This is by far the brightest council probably Lakewood's ever had, and next January it goes off the scale, I think. That's not necessarily a good thing, and I'll talk about that in a second, but certainly it is a better prospect for this city than we've had in a long time. And as the video says, I did my best to emphasize a stress on economic development and on public safety. It means a lot to me that my son-in-law can work over there, over at Cartridge World, and my daughter can work over at Barnes & Noble and be able to see each other, that there are jobs in this community, and I think that's wonderful. What I hope to do now, frankly, is, as was stated in the video, I would like to be on an advisory commission, and I think that's important. One of the things I've noticed going to other cities, as part of my day job, is that you go to a Federal Way, you go to an Auburn, certainly you go to a Spokane or Tacoma, and you go to an event, there are not only council members, but there are ex-council members who have taken what they have learned and stayed involved. Lakewood is a little short on that, partly because we are a new city, partly because of the way politics was laid out. I think, I could be wrong, but I think Bill Harrison, serving on the Landmarks Board, is the one ex-council member we've got on advisory board. I could be wrong, I could be forgetting someone, but we definitely need more, because as the city matures, we want to have a cycle going of, leaders on the council, leaders off of the council, and all kind of rotating through the community in a healthy and full way, and I hope to be involved in that. The one thing that I offer as a thought and a caution is that we went from these angry, tumultuous, bitter, personal times 8 or 9 years ago to an era where citizens are so comfortable, feel so confident that hardly anyone runs for council for a different reason. And if my math is right, by January, there will be 4 of the 7 who ran for office and did not have an opponent. On the one hand, that's a great thing. It means the citizens have comfort, have confidence. That's really good. But it also means that points of view have not been expressed, that people who might have run are slumbering, if you will. And one needs to be wary, because what happened before can happen again. And the longer that citizens feel comfortable, the longer that citizens trust you, the more there will be a reaction if they decide they had reason not to trust you, or they had reason to think that they were betrayed. So I encourage you all to remember the citizens that you met while doorbelling, who were angry, who may or may not have given a speech that you'd want to hear at your dinner table, but whose points of view really matter, because this is a community that welcomes all points of view. That's the great thing about Lakewood, and we want to remember them. As I said, I can't imagine a brighter group of people to leave this with, and I am so honored to have been a part of this group. Thank you.
Doug, I did want to make some comments, if I could. Becky Huber, Lakewood, Washington, the president of the Lakewood Historical Society. Of course, one of the things that he mentioned in his proclamation, his involvement with the society, and Walter has been on our board just about as long as he's been a council member. And of course, he and Steve Dunkelberger did the wonderful book about Lakewood, and it's been 6 years. 2005, wow. Time flies when you're having fun. And we still have a lot of visitors come in that love reading and finding and buying the book. It's really hard to tell how much Walter has contributed to our community because there's a lot of things he's done that he's never told anybody or you never discover until weeks, months, or years later. And I think so he's going to continue in that vein, I'm sure.
Hello, Dave O'Keefe with Communities and Schools of Lakewood, also resident of Lakewood. In fact, I lived across the street from Walter for about 8 years, so we grew up on School Street with our kids, pretty much the same age and all that, so it's a pretty good coincidence I'm here tonight to be able to thank you publicly, Walter, for all you've done for the city and all the communications and links that you've made with people. And then on a professional note, with Communities and Schools, your role with Comcast has been very supportive to help us serve more kids with the funding that we have and the support from Comcast. So good stuff all around. Thank you.
Well, I had a 30-minute speech on Walter's contributions to the city code, starting with subsection 428.B2. But that being said, there are a couple of things that I think have been unsaid about Walter that I really appreciated and appreciate. One is his commitment to transparency, and he's our kind of guiding light as to open government. And I really appreciated that as a new council member and somebody who keeps you reminding you of that. Secondly, I appreciate his well-reasoned opinions. I always say everybody's entitled to their own opinions. You aren't entitled to your own facts. I have never seen Walter off on a fact. Sometimes I might not agree with his opinion. That's very unusual. But he also always expresses himself well and lets you know how he arrived at his destination. And I'm going to miss that. And along that same line, having come from a mill town where English was a second language, both literally and figuratively, I really appreciate his wordsmithing and his turn of a phrase. And that's a little nuance that I've always enjoyed from the council dais. Plus that, he votes right, correctly almost all the time. So I'll miss that too. But thank you, Walter.
Mary Moss, Lakewood, Washington. And I would just like to say to Walter that I will never forget the way you reached out to me when you found out that I was interested in joining the council. Walter was, not just Walter, but all of you were, but Walter was especially instrumental in getting me sitting down and just relaxing and talking over a cup of coffee. He can do that so well. I'm still trying to learn how to compose myself and just relax and talk like Walter does, but it's not happening. But I want to thank you for that, and thank you for the service that you've done for our city. I'm reading your book, and I'm learning a lot about the city that I didn't know, and I appreciate that. So thank you so much for all you've done.
I feel I'm at an Irish wake and we're standing in line to say our adieus and farewell, and the body's not cold yet. But Walter, I just want to say thank you for all you've done for us and for us newbies who are not so much newbies anymore, but your sage wisdom from the dais has been great, and the historical perspective you've provided to those of us who are new but now into our second, going on third year has been fantastic and well received certainly by us and appreciated by us, so I want to thank you for that. You know, going back about 6 years, I think is when we started to get to know one another, when I made my first run at council, and you sat down and invited me out for coffee, asked me to pay for it, of course. And we had a great conversation about the history of the city and your vision. And more importantly, I think you were interested in what I had to say and the thoughts I brought to the table from my conversations with folks and residents within the city of Lakewood. And I think that's a great strength that you have brought, is always the willingness to listen to others and their perspective and to weigh in with a kind and gentle wisdom, if you will. And so thank you for your service. You've been a great attribute and a fine mentor and brethren on the council. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I'm Andrew Neiditz from Lakewood, Washington, and I won't take all 3 minutes. But I would like to say to you, Walter, on behalf of all the city employees, which I'm honored to be able to represent, that in all the years that you've been on this council, with all the difficult political discussions that took place here, you were always very respectful of the employees and the service that they provide. And even though they don't really have a voice at this podium most of the time, you were there to remember that they were there, that they were doing a good job, and that they were putting their personal effort into it during difficult budget discussions and so forth. And so that's very much appreciated. The other thing is the maturing of the city of Lakewood, as was mentioned in the video. So often, Walter, you and I have had discussions about, is this just another incorporation discussion going on, when some of the tougher debates over the last few years were playing out. And the fact that we're a good 15 years old now as a city, I think incorporation is here to stay. And I think the fact that you're acknowledging it is a real sign of us all being ready to move forward. So thank you for your commitment to all of us.
Claudia Thomas, Lakewood, 96th Avenue. Walter, what can I say? I don't have anybody to eat chocolate with in meetings. Walter had a chance to sit by me for a long time, and we needed some extra energy, so I always had chocolate in my pocket. But nevertheless, Walter, you and I are going out together, and it's been a wonderful ride, and I've appreciated your contributions tremendously. I see you taking, great notes and making certain that you shared those notes with the community, and I'm sure it was greatly appreciated. I'm glad to know you not just as a council member, but as a friend, and you've been that way, and you've given your best to this city, and I want to thank you for that and any part that we may have played together. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm Michael Brandstetter, coincidentally also from Lakewood, Washington. And Walter, I want to thank you for the mentorship, both direct and by example, that you've given to me, that I think has allowed me to be a better council member during the past 4 years from your example. And I particularly learned from you that you don't start from any sort of preconception about things, that you work through the issues that face the city, and you look at them and you meld the ideas that are brought to you by staff and other council members to reach decisions 90% of the time. But I also appreciate the 10% of the time where you said you can allow the Don Quixote in you to come out, and you can tilt out a windmill every once in a while and go and do that, and then have a little bit of freedom to do that. And I've appreciated that example and wisdom from you as well. Thank you.
You could make all the media if you said you lived in another city. Yeah, it'd be. Two things really quick. First of all, Walter Neary, Lakewood, Washington. I'll be doing that in January too, or February, or certainly by the budget. Two things really quick. First of all, the council's birthday present to Cindy is that I'm being freed for the rest of the evening, so we're going out for dinner. That's why I'm going to be disappearing. But I also, as Kurt mentioned, Comcast is involved in a broadband access program, and next Monday night I will be in Spokane at the first class to teach internet to people who haven't used internet before. It's something I sort of have to do as what Doug calls the pesky day job that pays the bills. But I do want to take the opportunity, I think that this has been wonderful. Hard to imagine something like this happening 8 years ago. This is just deeply moving. But I do want to talk about Claudia for a second. Doug mentioned being there at the beginning. I have a very clear memory of the very first campaign forum of all of the there were 40 people who ran for the city council at the first Lakewood because there were no incumbents, so why not run, right? And there were 40 of them. And you remember Claudia, and I remember Claudia. I can't say I remember all 40 of those people. I remember Jim, I remember Doug, certainly. But Claudia glows with this energy and positivity that if you look back on the history of Lakewood, the support for human services, America's Promise was really one of the things that made Lakewood unique. And that's historic. That's big stuff. And it's not just history as a concept, but it's making things real for young people, kind of people the young people that Dave works with at communities and schools. And that commitment to human services is something very special. I remember Bill Harrison talking about, what's going to make us special? What's going to make us different than any other city? And I'm convinced Claudia made us different than any other city by her drive for the young people. That will be a huge challenge to replace in this council. In fact, I don't think Claudia could be replaced, but I think the comet she created will not be stopped, and the young people will continue to have advocates here. But I am sorry to miss your party, but we'll see you around. All right, thank you all.
So Walter will miss the rest of the meeting with no deduction from salary to go to dinner with his wife Cindy. I should point out as he's leaving too, there was a little phrase in the proclamation, ad hoc committees and that sort of thing. Two of them come to mind, particularly as we're getting ready now to have sewer availability in Tillicum. Walter was on a 3 council member committee or task force that actually went out and put together a slide presentation, went into the Tillicum Woodbrook neighborhood, discussed sewers and options and all of those things. That was very instrumental in our council at that time moving forward with the Public Works Trust Fund loan. And since Mr. Knight had stood up and made comments, I should also point out that Walter was on a special 3-member council committee that went out and interviewed references for city manager hire when we hired Andrew Knighted. So he was a key member of that committee as well. So I just didn't want it to get by with just a little ad hoc without putting some ad to the hoc.